Should we just get them all out of the way now? You know what I'm talking about. Top of the morning, Holy Mother Mary, Luck of the Irish, Oh Danny Boy, the pipes, and so on. That might be quite reductive, but we do have some real literary pots of gold coming up. From the Emirates Literature Foundation in Dubai, this is the Boundless Book Club, the podcast about the books and the topics that you request. If you want to send us your suggestions, find us on social or ping us an email on comms@emirateslitfest.com. Today, in honour of the man who allegedly drove all the snakes out of Ireland, we're going to be talking about Irish literature. You're here with
Annabelle,
Ahlam,
and me, Andrea. And joining us shortly, we also have the wonderful author Sheila Maher, who is the author of the absolutely enchanting Six at the Table, Take the 70s, Add Family and Mix Well. But first, welcome to season 2.
welcome guys.
We're back with stacks of books. Lots of fantastic authors joining us for a chat in the coming episodes, so do stay tuned, and happy St. Patrick's Day, guys.
Happy St. Patrick's Day and happy my birthday, I have to say.
Happy your birthday!
That's the first thing I tell every Irish person I meet. I'm like, my birthday's on St. Patrick's Day.
my
Fantastic.
birthday's the day after, so usually whenever I want to celebrate my birthday, people are not feeling very well.
I wonder why. You know why? I have a guess, which kind of links to the mythology of St. Patrick's Day. So do you know why people wear green for St. Patrick's Day?
Because of the...
And
clover?
It's not a trick question. So the mythology says that people traditionally wore green in Ireland, which is a very green nation, so that fairies wouldn't see them and pinch them. So it's like camouflage, because fairies are really quite mischievous.
Oh, interesting. You know what? When I'm talking about my book later on, because you just connected the dots for me there. I didn't know that was a significant thing in their culture, because there's a bit of like fairy energy in my book. So I'll talk about that a little bit later.
Fantastic. I've also got lots of fairy energy in my book.
There's something of that in mine as well, but not fairies, but like a sense of the supernatural and the otherworldly, I think.
So what did you actually choose then, Annabelle?
Oh, starting with me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. So I chose a book based on an author that I'd already read before. Her name is Jess Kidd, and the book that I'd previously read was a book called The Hoarder, and I think it's also called Mr. Flood's Last Resort in different parts of the world. You know, some books have different titles depending on where they're published, and I really enjoyed it. There were elements of the supernatural. So in that book there's a character who can see all of the Catholic saints just kind of walking around, and that's something that comes into the book that I've got here as well. So Jess Kidd, I think her first book was a book called Himself, and that's the one that I'm sharing today, and it's set in Ireland. There's basically, the concept is tall, dark, handsome stranger. He's in his 20s, from Dublin, turns up in sleepy village where everyone knows everyone's business in Ireland. And it's the 70s, and he's got flared trousers. He hasn't shaved. Everyone's thinks of him as kind of this dirty hippie. And then there are quite a few very prim and proper older ladies, matronly women of the village, who do not approve of him sweeping in and disrupting the status quo. And the book actually starts with a murder, and you find out at the beginning of the book, I'm not really spoiling anything, that this young man is in town not to just cause a flutter amongst the young women of the town and disrupt the orderliness of the village, but he's there to investigate the circumstances of his birth, what happened to his mother, because he actually grew up in an orphanage. He was dumped on the doorstep of an orphanage in Dublin, and the book is essentially a supernatural murder mystery, where he's trying to investigate what actually happened to his mum, where she went, was she murdered? And it's not just him investigating this. There's this older woman. So Mahoney is the main guy who's kind of trying to figure out what happened to his mum, and he befriends this elderly lady called Mrs. Corley, who has this theatric past, and she wears her flamboyant wig still now, even though she's, you know, like fading away essentially. She's got a lot of health problems. She's in bed most of the day, and he's kind of staying in this B&B where she's also staying. And she decides that that they're going to try and work together, as she's like this sort of Miss Marple character, and she decides, we're going to try and work together and figure out what happened to your mum by putting on a play and kind of drawing the culprit out. So in the audition process, they're actually interrogating the people of the town and so on and so forth. There's a lot of darkness in the story. Obviously, there's kind of a gruesome murder that starts everything off, and there's a lot of pain. And he reflects back to his life being raised by nuns. And the most interesting thing about this book is that there's, without kind of explaining it away or trying to figure out why it is a thing, both he and Mrs. Corley are able to see the dead. And that is the most interesting thing about this book, is he's investigating this potential murder, and the entire time he can see kind of like dead cats and people who've killed themselves, or just people who've passed away from old age, just wandering about the town. And you think, when you figure out what he's trying to find out, and the gift that he has, you wonder, as he wonders, why can't I see my mum if she is dead? And so that's all I will say, because I don't want to give too much away.
That sounds amazing.
It's incredible, and the writing is phenomenal as well. And there's one bit I wanted to read to you, because we are in the month of reading, and I thought you would particularly like this. It's a kind of supernatural element, but it does talk about kind of the power of books as well. So this is Mrs. Corley talking to Mahoney in kind of her room, and she's got this wonderful collection of books. Mrs. Corley reaches for her walking frame, and with Mahoney's help moves her legs off the bed and puts on her slippers. With great effort she stands, and Mahoney sees how small she is, not quite 5 feet tall, and the weight of dry hide and honeycombed bone alone. She sways, curved and calcified by time, smiling up at him. Open the doors, Mahoney. The French doors are stuck fast and blossoming with mold, but eventually they give, and the night air falls in around Mahoney as if it's been waiting with its face pressed against the glass. That's it, throw them wide. The night air stalks into the room and starts to tease the dust along the skirting boards. Mrs. Corley takes a step forward, stumbling a little in her carpet slippers. Look around you, she whispers. The room is changing, see? The lights are burning brighter. Can't you feel it? The books want to tell you something. They want to help. And then Mahoney feels it. The books, the papers, and the magazines, all of them pulsing with a faint heartbeat. They're watching him, holding their breath. Mahoney suddenly wants to shout out against the pressure of all of these waiting words.
Beautiful.
It's lovely.
Yeah. It's just brilliantly well written. So it's a good murder story. Murder mystery. It's a good murder mystery, and it's really well written, and the character's fantastic. And there's a lot of kind of Irish acerbic wit in there in the dialogue, which was the real highlight for me as well.
The book that I read for today, I actually listened to it on audio, and the voice actor was really, really good, and just did the Irish accents for all the characters and the voices and the tones. And I really felt like I connected with the story a lot more on audio than maybe I would have reading it, maybe not being so familiar with some of the Irish terminology, but hearing it, you kind of understand in context a little bit more. And I feel like I really love audiobooks, and I feel some books definitely for me are better on audio and some are better being read. Like Born a Crime by Trevor Noah is one that I loved on audio, just because, again, he does does the accents, he does his grandma's voice, he does his mother's tone, he does, all of the voices himself, and he really brings the story to life on audio. And I feel like there's no way anyone can convince me that reading that is better than hearing him tell his entire story. And the book that I want to talk about today, I also listened to on audio. It's by Emma Donoghue, who was recommended by an Irish friend of mine. And I love that I found her because I really, really enjoyed this book. And I want to now go back and read her others. The book that I'm talking about today is called The Wonder. And it's set in the mid 1800s in Ireland, in Midland Ireland, and it's inspired by the Great Irish Famine, which I didn't even know about. In that, there was sort of like an attack or a disease in their crops, and all the potato crops didn't, they suffered for a good number of years. And the Irish population at that time, 1 million Irish people passed away from that, and 2 other million immigrated away from Ireland. So the story of The Wonder is a little girl who apparently hasn't eaten in 4 months. She hasn't eaten since April, and they sent this nurse called Lib, who is the main character, along with the little girl, who comes from London, and she's going to Midland Ireland to as one of the nurses they've put on this case to study what's happening and monitor the little girl. So that she's going there for the watch. And obviously Lib is coming from a scientific background. She wants to look for the facts. She wants to examine this little girl's physical, is she deteriorating? Is there any effects on her body? What can she find? She wants to also investigate, in her mind, she's like, there's no way this little girl hasn't eaten in 4 months. Someone is sneaking her some food somewhere. So she goes in there. And she's with that hat on, and she's very suspicious of everyone around her and all of that. And the little girl has her parents and the little village, like you say, Annabelle. Everybody knows everybody's business, and everybody knows who's who, and everyone's asking about Anna O'Donnell and what's the latest and how's she doing? Is she still not eaten? And, she's just judging everyone and Lib, the nurse, is judging everyone and everything around Anna O'Donnell. She looks at her parents and she's like, what kind of parents, are like bought into this story that their daughter is this wonder, and there's like tourists coming in to just take a look at her, and they leave some money there. And so she's like, is there some hidden motive here? Are they trying to make money? Are they trying to is it them? Is it the priest that comes to visit her? Is he, because all the money they say goes to donations to the church? So she's like, is it the priest that's kind of like got sneaking her food, but just got them bought into this whole crazy story? So it's like a constant struggle between the old authority of like religion and these sort of spiritual beliefs that they had, and then this new authority of science that she's coming in with. And it's like this ongoing battle, and they just can't communicate, because it's just 2 completely different languages that they're coming from. And throughout the story, Lib and this little girl are getting closer, and it's a really beautifully written story. I think from what I've read about Emma Donoghue, she tells small stories, but then lingers in those spaces, and some of the most sort of significant things happen in the little incidents. It's not a big plot and crazy things happening in the story. It's like taking a small setting and bringing it to life in her beautiful literature and way of words. And I really enjoyed it, and I loved it on audio. So I would really recommend anyone who's looking for Irish literature to do this on audio if they can.
A question.
Yeah.
You said she did, when you listened to it, she did all the different accents and the voices and so on. Was the person reading it Irish, or was she another person doing an Irish accent?
So she did she's reading the narrator's parts in just a British accent, and then she does the dialogue in an Irish accent.
Oh,
I don't know where she's
interesting.
from. Yeah, yeah. So that was it was really interesting, and it's not just even doing the Irish accent really well. It's just the tones and the voices. She was really good at doing the mother and then doing the father and the priest, very different to each other. It's real acting. It's a real skill.
I was saying they even have an Oscars for audiobooks. They have the Audio Awards, which is a really great place to find. If you want a great narrator, you can look at who got best narrator, and you can choose books that way as well. Top tip, Andrea, you were saying.
Oh yeah, I was gonna just remind everybody that I think Ahlam promised she'd do an Irish accent for us today.
No. I think you did them in the intro. That was fine. That's enough.
That wasn't an accent. That was just me talking.
I wouldn't know the difference. So
I think that's a bad sign.
Yeah. So the book I chose today, should I move on swiftly before it gets too embarrassing? It's an absolute masterpiece. It's called Artemis Fowl by Eoin Colfer, and it is, I don't know if you can see this, it's criminally good.
It is criminally good.
It's so good. And I remember when this first came out 20 years ago. So it's having its 20th anniversary this year. And I think when a book has an anniversary, you know it's a book worth paying attention to. So it's a really brilliant book. Eoin Colfer, I'm getting them mixed up now. Eoin Colfer, I think, was a teacher who wrote this. And I think he really gets how to make things fun for kids. It's about a boy called Artemis Fowl. He is a ruthless criminal mastermind, and he is clever, and he is wealthy, and he is 12 years old, and he has no parental supervision because his dad, Artemis Sr., has disappeared, presumed dead, because he was doing this dodgy deal with, I think, Coca-Cola, sending Coca-Cola to Russia. Big explosion on the ship. He's missing in action. And when that happened, Artemis' mum took to the bed, which is, one of those things that people did all the time in Jane Austen's novels. They take to the bed. And she's been there for almost a year, very confused, sort of sometimes recognizes Artemis and sometimes not. And it's really quite sad. I won't dwell on that too much now, but back to our story. So Artemis Fowl, 12 years old, insanely clever, and he has just found out that fairies are actually real. And actually, sidebar, leprechauns are actually just fairies, and that's kind of their job, is to be at the end of the rainbow with their gold, but they're just fairies, nothing special. Yeah,
that's some good marketing from the Fae community there.
I know. So fairies are real, and they are not the Tinkerbell kind, but they're armed and they're dangerous, and they can certainly hold their own when Artemis decides to go after them to get the fairy gold. Because when his dad disappeared, the fowl's fortune was somewhat diminished. So he, instead of dealing with all the emotional trauma of effectively losing two parents at the same time, decides to focus on restoring the family fortune. So he's going to get the gold, and then when he has the gold, people will sit up and take note, and possibly he might spend some of that money on trying to find his father, but we don't really know. And then there is this one particular fairy. Her name is Holly Short. She's a captain in the fairy police force. And she has not done the ritual that fairies need to do, every so often, to restore their magic. So she has been too busy being a police. So she hasn't done the ritual for a really long time. And she is, just completely tapped out. She's got no magic left and she needs to go and restore her magic ASAP, just as Artemis has deciphered this fairy book that tells you about the ritual. And you can only do it in very, very few places. You need to have a large oak tree, I believe, that needs to be more than 100 years old. It needs to be a bend in the river. It's very complicated. But in short, he figures out where you need to go to renew your magic. So he goes there just to wait for a fairy to come, and Holly Short is on her way. And then all sorts of magical heist adventure happens, and I'm not going to ruin it for anybody by telling you any more. There's some really fantastic action, and that's some of that wonderful Irish wit that you mentioned earlier is in here. And I've been reading it partly with my 7-year-old, and he really enjoys like the swaggery, cocky language sometimes. Like so Artemis has a helper, like a servant whose name is Butler, and that's his surname. And there's one line where it says, "Butler could kill you 100 different ways without using his armory, though I'm sure one would be quite sufficient." And my 7-year-old absolutely loves that, whereas I get really weepy at the thought of this poor 12-year-old boy on his own in this big mansion with no parents. So it's got something for everybody, and I really recommend it.
So it's a children's book or young adult?
Yes.
It's for everyone.
It's for everyone. And it's got all of that wonderful, like, fast-paced action, but also it's got real heart, because underlying all of this is this like huge sadness that this boy feels, and having lost his parents, and his mum, who he goes in to see in her bedroom with the drapes drawn, and she will kind of ask him who he is and why he's there, and to go away, and where is my Artemis?
Oh,
I know.
Yeah, that's really sad.
They're great. And this is just the first out of many Artemis Fowl adventures, so if you haven't read them, I think you should.
That's awesome. And we had Eoin Colfer at the festival in the past, twice actually, and so hopefully we can have him back again one day.
That would be amazing. I think he's also written adult novels.
Yes.
At least one, because I remember reading one many years ago, and they were also fun.
Yeah, he's got a new one out that's about a dragon that lives in a Louisiana swamp.
Everything you need in a novel.
Yeah, pretty much. Why are we talking about any others?
I don't know.
They're so unique though. Every one of the books that we've picked today, like, they all have a bit of magic, supernatural in them, and I wonder, if that's a reflection of the broader Irish literature scene. But
there was every so often a turn of phrase that was just so Irish, but yet so wonderful that I wanted to just make it part of everyday language. And just the way characters talk to one another in Irish literature, like, even if they're the best of friends, or specifically if they are the best of friends, there's a lot of kind of the insults that people like, insulting each other is a sign of friendship, and that's something that speaks to me, because that's how I feel about kind of insults and being rude. A lot of the excerpts that I bookmarked from this book I couldn't actually read because they were so full of swearing, but it was stuff like that, particularly in the book, that really appealed to me. Just the banter is just so good in this book, and I think in a lot of great contemporary Irish fiction.
Yeah, but I think
I felt that in my book as well.
That's not the fiction, that's the culture.
Yeah, but it really shines
wonderful.
through. And I think it takes a good writer to be able to mirror that with dialogue and not make it seem forced.
Yeah. Were there any particular phrases that stood out to you that you wanted to use every day?
There was one that I thought was particularly good that I would share with you. Okay. As Tig pointed out, they were ignoring the slice of bad news as you would a fart in a confessional box.
That's brilliant.
There are many, but that was chef's kiss.
That is pretty good.
Yeah. And on that fart in a confessional box note, I think I'll leave my comments there.
Sheila is a writer, a teacher, regular contributor to RTE Sunday Miscellany, and the author of the memoir Six at the Table, Take the 70s, Add Family, and Mix Well, which tells the story of her childhood through meals shared around the kitchen. It celebrates the central role that food plays in family life, but with a strong flavor of 70s nostalgia. Hello, Sheila, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me on the Boundless Book Club. Lovely to be here.
Lovely to have you. How is gorgeous Dublin today?
Well, it's actually beautiful. Blue sky day, sunny, cold. It is March after all, but I'll take the blue skies any day.
Sheila, I have to tell you the thing I tell every Irish person I meet. My birthday is on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, wow. An honoring Paddy.
Yes, so I'm coming to Ireland one birthday.
You have to, after this is all over. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, for sure. So we invited you to join on this particular podcast because we're talking about Ireland and Irish literature. And your own book paints a very clear picture of a particular time and place, and event hits on flavors of Ireland in the 70s. So tell us, Sheila, we wanted to know what book you'd like to recommend for us today on the occasion of St. Patrick's.
So it was a really tough call to pick. I had two juggling around in my head, but I plumbed for Donal Ryan's The Spinning Heart. It is actually now part of the Leaving Cert curriculum here in Ireland, so it's very much firmly established as a book about Ireland. It's set in 2010, which is just post the crash. So we had a boom and then we had a bust. And I suppose, he may not have meant to write about such devastation and such struggles and such darkness, but boy, did he. And I suppose at the time when that book came out, I just went, yes. We read about the banks collapsing and the builders going bust, but this was people, this was individual story and families being destroyed and, people's dignity being taken from them. And he does it in such a humane way. And he doesn't spare any blushes. I mean, the language can be really, out there. I know my 8-year-old mother couldn't finish it, even though she loves Donal Ryan now. She found the language a bit too coarse and vulgar, to use her term. But that's the way people speak, and they are speaking their truth about how they felt. So I'll tell you, it's written in 21 chapters, 21 voices of people in rural Ireland from this unnamed town, where you open up and you realize a builder has gone bust. He's borrowed heavily from a bank. He actually has some dubious investments in Dubai, went sour, and he has scarpered. Nobody knows where. They suspect to Europe somewhere. And the first narrator is his foreman, who is a decent skin. He's a nice guy. And he's actually the moral compass throughout the book. He's the one very solid, nice character. He loves his wife, loves his kids, kind of does unasked for favors for people, just a really decent bloke. He was the foreman for this builder, and he's just in shock at being so let down, and he's reeling from it. Now, he also has a very complicated relationship with his father, and those two things carry with them. And so we only meet Bobby in his first narration, in his monologue, and then the monologue, then the next person talking is the father of the builder, who's scarpered, and he carries the story. So we learn a little bit more about Bobby and about life, and this man is so ashamed that his son took his business that he built up as a navvy in Liverpool, then came back to Ireland, built the business from the ground up, and then he's so ashamed that his son has done this. And then to compound the shame, the son hasn't been paying his employees social insurance for years. So when all these poor men who are laid off go to social welfare, they don't even exist. They're not even getting the money they're entitled to. So it's kind of layer upon layer of shame for this man. And yet, he tells us bits about Bobby and what's going on. And then the next narrator carries the story on a little bit. And they're all their own thoughts, and each of them is impacted, whether it's depression, schizophrenia, alcoholism, of course, it's Ireland. there's sexual abuse, there's a woman coming out, there's everything, but it's all done very subtly. And each of these people, as well as having their personal story, has lovely insights on nature, on being a father, on life in general. They're all so human, and they're also brave, and they're struggling. And while it is very dark, I suppose there's hope there, because the people themselves are so brave, and they're struggling on. And just Donal Ryan has a really special way of writing. I think his writing is just brilliant. And he's written loads since. And this was his first one. And he's just been brilliant ever since. And I suppose that's why I chose that book. There's so much in it. And it's only a tiny little book. It's only around 170 pages. So it's not a very big book. And you might think at the beginning, 21 narrators, I'm going to be confused. But it's a credit to him that you know these people. As you're reading, you know who's who. You get it. He just does it so subtly, and he weaves them all so well.
And so, it's a debut novel, but it won so many awards, including being shortlisted for the Booker, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So no, it was some achievement. It really was. And, I think he said it wasn't meant to be about the boom and bust, more about connectedness and what lies beneath. But for me, it was just great that someone really got the essence of the devastation that happens when these builders and bankers and developers lose the run of themselves. And then what happens to the little people, what happens there. And I think he really got it,
Such a great recommendation. I really want to read it now.
Oh, good. Just be prepared. That some of the language, it's raw.
I wanted to ask about that. So you have all these 21 different voices. Are all of them equally raw, or do you find that some are really vulgar and some are very prim and proper, and they have different voices?
Yes, they do. There's no prim and proper. I will say I was waiting for a prim and proper. Even the small child who narrates isn't prim and proper. But definitely he mixes them up, because there is some really, there's some ones that are quite hard to take, and then he balances out with ones that are more, they're gentler and they're not quite so in your face. So he does that job well. But you even have a ghost in it as well talking. It's great. There's everything.
We were just saying that in all of our books, there's been a little bit of supernatural presence in all of our books written by Irish authors.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you, Sheila, if I were to ask you, who are the top 3 Irish writers in Ireland, in the history of Ireland's literature, who would you pick?
I would probably say William Trevor, because actually one of his books was in my head to pick as my favorite, because I loved the story of Lucy Galt. So William Trevor probably, and I would put Donal Ryan up there now. I'd have to, because he's written so many books at this stage. I do like Anne. Do you know what? The other recommendation that unfortunately, she's only her next novel. Her novel is only coming out this year. Is Claire Keegan. I don't know if you've heard of her. She has written more short stories. But her book Foster was also one that I was thinking of recommending. It's only 70 pages long. It has won a lot of awards for short stories, and I think it's still a bestseller. And it's just her writing about the conflicting emotions and nature. It's just, I was in floods reading that book. It really, really got to me, and I can't wait for her next book to come out. I think she has something really special to say as well. So that they spring to the front of my mind, because when I was thinking what's my recommendation, they're the 3 authors. I was Claire Keegan, Foster, or William Trevor, or Donal Ryan. I was debating which of the 3 of those I'd go for. So
brilliant. That's great.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I actually wanted to ask about what we've noticed about all of the books that we've been reading and recommending is that kind of strong sense of the supernatural. So in the book that I recommended as well, there's a man who can see ghosts everywhere he goes, and it's quite a common thing that's accepted. And in one of Jess Kidd's later books as well, she has a character who can see all of the Catholic saints, and no one else around her can see them. And I think Andrea, you were talking about, there's obviously fairies in Artemis Fowl. And you mentioned as well, Sheila, there's, you know, kind of that element as well comes into books. Is it just kind of a fluke of the books that we've been talking about today, or is that quite a common theme throughout a lot of contemporary Irish fiction?
That's a good question. Do you know what? Even when I think about I suppose now that you say it, it's sometimes it takes somebody outside to see what we just take for granted. Because Solar Bones, I don't know if you know Solar Bones, another one, Cormac, the one that's on one sentence, the whole book is just one sentence, but that's also narrated by a man who's just died. And like in Ireland, we just take that for granted. There's all these different layers, and we don't question it. But it's funny that you should all notice that. It's not, that's mad that your outside observations are something that I would probably think is present in a lot of our literature, that we just go, there you go. There's ghosts, there's dead people talking. Oh yeah.
That's totally
fine.
normal.
That's fine. Maybe is it because of our spirituality and our religious faith that's so ingrained in us? Possibly,
maybe
that runs through all of us in Ireland. It is the religious that may be part of it, and our spirituality, the Celtic thing as well. It might be part of it.
What a great recommendation. Thanks so much for joining us today, Sheila. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you with us today. If you want to check out Sheila's book, it is called Six at the Table, Take the 70s, Add Family, and Mix Well. If you want to check out more Irish literature, which you should, you can check out our blog where we list some of the names you know and the names you should know. That's all for now. You can send us your suggestions for topics on comms@emirateslitfest.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to, leave us a 5-star rating to help others find us too. Next time, we will be talking about literature in inhospitable settings. Stay tuned for This Place Will Kill You. Until then,
Sláinte.
Thank you.
Thank you all.